Awesome. The webinar is in broadcast mode, so they can technically see us and hear us, but we're not
Hello, everybody.
live. Hello, everyone. I see the number. This is my favorite part, when the numbers go up, and at first there's like a couple people joining, and then it's like 10, 20 people join. That's pretty fun to watch. And I think if I click on the attendee tab, we can even see them. Let's do some shout outs here. Dylan, I see you on here. Dana, good to see you. I see a couple Johns, obviously. We got Scott on here. Hey, Scott, good to see you're joining the series still. And then we always have one person who's first in the chat. I see Evan's on here. Good to talk with you, Evan.
Yeah. Get quite a few new people.
Evan's been a panelist in the past. I see Gregg Pollock is joining. That's interesting, as I am Gregg Pollock.
It's the other Gregg.
There's only one of me.
All right, so we'll wait about 1 more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Awesome. This is exciting. Let's see if I can get the chat. Oh, there's the chat. Hey, everybody. Oh, so this is one of my favorite parts of when we get started. So this is Gregg. I'm here in the Virginia area. Billy, where are you dialing in from today?
I'm in Portland, Oregon, so other side of the country.
Awesome. So when you join, jump on the chat and say hi to everybody, and tell us where you're dialing in from. I see Atlanta, obviously
Alaska.
Alexandria, Alaska. Wow. Kimberly, welcome.
Texas.
Yep. All right.
Carrie from Rhode Island's here. Welcome.
Cali.
Scott from Southern California. You might be
all
way
over.
too far.
Yeah.
We got DC up in New York. Some more Cali
Virginia,
friends.
Minneapolis.
All right. So it looks like we
All over.
we got a nice quorum here. We're going to go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. I'm Bill Conforti with Association Analytics. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our virtual discussion series where we bring together leaders and learners each week in fun and engaging sessions aimed at optimizing business results and staying relevant in these challenging times. Today's session is about data-informed community management. We're all seeing our engagement moving online, so the importance of communities is as high as ever. Today we'll talk about using the community to find ways to help members and stay relevant, using analytics to inform community and broader strategy decisions, and we'll see how community impacts the rest of the organizations. A couple of notes for our new attendees. A recording of the session will be available on the registration site, and if you missed any of the previous sessions, we have, I believe, 10 or more on there now. All the recordings will be available. As always, during the session, we love to hear from you. We already have started. Use the chat, use the Q&A, and submit your questions to the panel. Today, our speakers are two online community experts, A2's own Gregg Pollock and Billy Volpone from Higher Logic. I'll now turn it over to the guys to introduce themselves.
Thanks a lot, Billy. You're up first.
Thank you, Gregg. So pleasure to be chatting with everyone today. My name is Billy Volpone, as mentioned, based out of the West Coast here. Been at Higher Logic as a senior community strategist for the last going on 3 years now. Worked with Gregg, love Gregg, and I also previously came from a company before Higher Logic called Jive Software, where I spent over a decade there. So all in, since about 2007, I've been doing communities and communities only, launching them for different types of networks, members, nonprofits, corporations, intranets for employee collaboration. So I've kind of seen a lot of different flavors of what drives community and community analytics, and I'm here to talk with you all about that.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Billy. And my name's Gregg Pollock. I thought we'd do a fun introduction today. I was doing a meeting with someone a couple days ago, and she goes, "You're the Miata guy from that webinar." So I'm going to own it from now on. So this is me. I started my career with associations way back in the day at an association. And then I transferred over to the vendor side. So I used to work at top left, A to Z, doing the trade show floor plan management thing. Middle left is Higher Logic. I spent 5.5 years there doing the online community thing with Billy. And then bottom left, this is ASAE from this summer. where I joined the Association Analytics team. And today we're going to be talking about that specifically, analytics related to online communities. So you know a little bit about us. Bill, this is where we click the poll. We want to learn a little bit more about you. So we're going to ask 2 poll questions right off the front end to get to know everybody out there. Poll question number 1. There it is. Oh, we got both of them at the same time. So first one is, do you already have a community? Yes or no? And then do you run your online community, or do you have a role in running your online community? So go ahead and vote for those. Let us know where you fall, and we'll show the results so we can talk to you all today personally about what we're going to be covering. And part of the reason I invited Billy to this conversation is he has a really fresh perspective on online communities with his background. He's done a lot of online communities outside the association industry as well. And I think there's a lot of insight he's going to bring to the table, some new concepts with community, hopefully to push you a little bit beyond what your preconceived notions are with community. How's our results coming, Bill? There we go. Okay, so do you already have an online community? 60-30, not bad, not bad. And do you run your online community? That's about what I expected. 30% said yes, they have a role in the community, and about 67% said no, they don't. So we're going to talk to both personalities today. We want to cover this from the perspective of you run the online community, and data should be important to your life running the online community. We also want to cover this from the perspective of the 66% of you who don't run the online community. We want to help you understand what sort of insights and analytics you should be getting from your online community and what you should be doing with those things. Now, being this is a presentation about communities, we want to try and make this chat a mini community today. It already is, but we want to continue that process. And I'll give you a really interesting thought here. This is called the 99-1 rule. I didn't make this up. You can Google it. There's a Wikipedia page about it, so you know it's real. With online communities, about 1% are your heavy contributors. Today, Billy and I are playing the role of heavy contributors. About 9% of you are the intermittent contributors. Those are the people who are introducing themselves on the chat. And I want to break that rule today. I want to get more than 9% of you in the online chat posting stuff. And 90% of you are lurkers. And that's okay. If you don't want to participate in the chat, you don't have to. We're here to provide valuable content for you. And you should see something like this in your online community when you look at the numbers. Now, why did we pick this topic today? So we picked this topic today because Higher Logic and Association Analytics partnered with a group out there called ORI, and we did a survey of you. There's a fairly good chance today some of you actually participated in this survey, and we're gonna talk about why this survey was so important. But one of the things that came in was respondents, was there an increased use in your online community? And it's not a surprise. I put the arrow right over the number, of course. A large percentage of you, 54% who responded, said that your online community had increased right now amongst COVID. That's not a surprise. I would expect the use of your online community to increase under COVID. I'm going to tag Billy in right now, and we're going to talk more about what online communities should be doing, specifically additional things that you could be thinking about right now. That we're not going to physical meetings as much. We're not interacting in person as much. And virtual right now, like this, is a great way to get community going, interacting. So I'm going to tag Billy in, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things your community should be doing or should be providing for you. And if it's not, go talk to that community manager about this.
Yep. Billy? I think that's a great point, which is what you're seeing here is I created kind of a list of common features. A lot of times when people promote this idea of community, they're actually tossing out social functionality and thinking about things from the perspective of, I want people to engage more. I want people to be more collaborative. But in practice, that takes more of a mindset around creating a singular destination instead of any one feature. So when we think about community, we need to kind of step back from this idea of which functional aspect is it? And, there will be plenty of ways that we approach this for how we do events and how we do, for instance, chapter groups and things of that nature. We will need a functional or technical platform to allow us to get to that end goal. But at the end of the day, the user is not going to necessarily come for any one feature. So we want to start with the psychology of the individual, the member, the customer, the alumni, whoever it might be that we're trying to reach out and kind of put ourselves in their shoes and remember that they're not thinking in a functional aspect, they're thinking in a use case or a need aspect or what they want to get out of something or how they want to network with their peers or what events they want to attend. But more importantly, it's not really about the event, it's what they're going to get when they attend that event and what kind of networking comes of it.
Billy, you talked about something really important there is what the user wants out of it. Oftentimes when we craft solutions, we think about what we want to get out of it. But with community, specifically online communities, it's like herding cats, right? You can't force your online community to do something. You can push them in a direction, but oftentimes we need to provide a space for these people to have the type of interactions they want to have, and we need to facilitate that.
Yeah, I mean, even as we work with some of our clients, and if some of you use Higher Logic, really, at the end of the day, we are working with you as a vendor, but both of our organizations are catering to your end users, right? They, at the end of the day, are the true kind of deciders of will this be successful or not. So when I think about community, I do think about it like a town hall, a digital town hall. And obviously I've been doing this for a long time, and communities have been around longer than I've been in this space. They started as kind of like help centers online. But today, more than ever, because of COVID, it is a necessity, right? It is an expectation, and there have always been use cases that are very valuable and data to track that, like we're going to talk about. But now more than ever, it's just a demand that we have to meet because there is no other option. So when we think about community, we do want to think about it like I'm creating a digital destination, a town hall, a hub, if you will, that really is about centralization first and foremost. And that is, again, an expectation users have because of what they use in social media and other systems, which is I can go to a single place and I can network with my peers. And what that networking looks like and what the access is. For instance, we work with an autism organization out of Canada, right? And how they approach it and how maybe a business would approach it with a product or how an association would with a chapter. At the end of the day, it's going to be the same mentality is that I want access. So really what you're selling is or pitching or offering or allowing members to join is access. And so that's really how we want to start it is what would they like access to if you were in their position, what would be most beneficial to them? And sometimes that might be content, right? But sometimes it is the individual creating the content and sometimes it's the event itself and the extension of that event. So absolutely, I think we want to always start with what are we centralizing and how are we providing access without creating too many barriers.
So let's see in the chat, who here has sort of expanded the role of their community as a destination right now during COVID? How many people on the chat, and what have you done with it? Have you done virtual conferences in your community? Do you have board meetings or committee meetings that are taking place in your community? Have you changed the way you onboard new members to the community? If you've done something new with your community since COVID has taken over, post it in the chat and tell us a little bit about what your association has done that's new or different or fresh from the community. Let us know how that's going right there.
Yeah, a good example is, our annual customer conference that always takes place in DC. Guess what? It's virtual now in September. It's going to all be online over the course of multiple days. In-person academies, not anymore, right? That's going to all be online and digital. So learning is now e-learning. So, I mean, that's, and it looks like, annual conference is going to be virtual in August from Emily Robinson. Online education. So you guys are seeing the same things we are.
Virtual roundtables to continue the conversation. You know, if we were good enough, we would have had a virtual discussion following this in our community. We didn't get there yet, but it's on the list of things we want to tackle pretty soon. Adding webinars.
Absolutely.
John, that's a great topic. One of the sessions we did earlier in the series was how to virtualize your event with Liam O'Malley, who's Billy's very familiar with as well. And we talked specifically about that. I think that's a really great use case. Hybrid plans. Yep. More virtual interactions, Zoom meetings, workshops, webinars. A virtual conference with 2,100 plus attendees.
Wow.
Almost the same as in person. Congratulations, Jill. That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. I've actually talked with a few associations, believe it or not, who said they're making more revenue now than they planned on it because they were virtualizing all of their content. It cost them less to host the content. They didn't have to rent the physical location, and they were still making just as much money from all the attendees. 300% increase in logins since last year. Congratulations. That's phenomenal.
Well, that makes me think of something great. Cause like, for instance, when we work together and we would have our annual event, not everybody can ever make it. I mean, that's not the expectation that every customer will be able to physically be there. And we want to continue that conversation so that people that weren't able to attend can. beautiful thing about communities is everybody can be on it, and maybe at different times, but because of the nature of the persistent data, and then how we can track that with association analytics, but because of the nature of centralizing that content, it actually allows a little bit more of a democratized process around how we network. Everybody can engage, everybody can attend that event, so to speak, assuming we allow it, right, based on members. And that's really what this slide is looking at. Is I don't love the term community. Anybody that knows me knows that I've done webinars on this, which is the definition of community has morphed into basically defining anything and everything online. And so I see a lot of point solutions and blogs and forums called communities. And you know what? That's not wrong. It's absolutely correct to call a grouping of people a community. So really what I like to talk about more though is, but what we need is a network, right? We need something, because network is a verb. It really means to connect and engage for a common goal, a purpose, right? Again, whether that be for-profit, nonprofit, association, it doesn't matter. We are together trying to accomplish something. And it's not just about talking, it's about doing. So that's where we talk about kind of that idea of a network and some of those events where in some cases, there's nothing good about what is happening right now with COVID, but in some cases, it has allowed us to be more creative, whereas we weren't pushed previously to think about events in this way. And so I do hope, and I do want to get back to in-person events, but I think we're gonna see a transition to having that, just a larger digital presence of things, and hopefully that persists.
Yeah, question in the chat, as you type them, I'm gonna call them out. We're making this as interactive as we can do it today. Sarah wants to know if there's a way to get the post-event chat here. We want to do that for you. So what we want to do is we want to take some of the highlights from this and upload it onto our website where we post the recordings. So we won't post the entire chat. It gets pretty long. Not everybody wants to be in there, but we will post the highlights of it. I think we posted all of the names from our what do you call a Zoom meeting from a couple weeks ago. We posted a tag cloud with that for you. We'll try and make sure we post a lot of this good chat for you there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when we think about what,
sorry, go ahead.
When we think about what community should provide, outside of the cookie cutter answer of this is where the forum is, like how do I expand my mind and think beyond that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is such a great slide because I really think of community or a network as a cyclical, a fluid kind of engagement center. And what I mean by that is users need to have multiple reasons to come in. So anytime that we launch a network for any type of client, right, I am looking at very holistically what those use cases are and what drives a user in. And we want to break it down in a couple different ways, kind of three big takeaways. One, how can we make something more efficient? Right? So if users are coming in for information, they're seeking education, they're seeking knowledge, right? How do we create an efficient model where they can create and reuse that kind of data? A lot of people refer to this as support, but it can take on a lot of different variations, education and enablement. How can we, number two, how can we engage that user in a more meaningful, kind of thoughtful way? So it's not just, oh, I learned that, I took that certification, now I'll see you in a couple months. We don't want that from our members. We want more of a consistent engagement. And so this is where the digital events came in that we were just talking about, and where things like chapter groups or in the corporate space user groups, which frankly are the same thing, right, come into play, where we want you to talk either locally or around a strategic topic about something, and we want your feedback, right? So we want to hear from you. We call that many to many. So there is a dialogue between, say, your organization and your members, but there's also that peer-to-peer, and that happens kind of in an unstructured way, right, very ad hoc. And then how do we create expertise or advocacy or volunteerism, right? That's kind of the big one, which is we're leading up to that, which is if we do good resources, if we do good engagement, right, and we are effective in driving adoption, then does that create a higher level of, well, what Gregg said, 1%ers, how about 5%ers, how about 10%ers? Can we get people to not be a very small percentage of the community doing heavy lifting, but a larger percent of doing participation, even at a small scale? That's okay. Liking, sharing, bookmarking, voting on things, joining those groups, following those digests, that's good, as long as they're engaged in some way. And so we like to create this as a way for you to think about some of those adjacent pathways for a user, which is they might come in for education, but they might stay for that user group, right? They might share feedback, but then they might attend that event, right? And at the end of the day, what can we do to ask them to advocate on behalf of our association or our organization? So that's really what this is trying to say in the most simple way possible, is that we need to, again, put ourselves in their shoes and think about how many entry points can we create for our community, And if a user comes in for one reason, can we keep them there for another?
So let's see it in the chat. Besides your basic forum discussion, what activities do you promote inside your online community that continually foster that engagement? Or if you don't want to answer them, what are the entry points to your community? Besides discussions, besides your typical forum, is it online learning is in there? Is it that's where I go to access my directory? Is it that's where we've put our advocacy tools? Are you doing ideation? Are you asking for feedback and then running with that? What are the different activities that your community members can participate outside of the typical discussion forum? Post that in the chat. I want to see some fun, creative answers in there. Let's hear what you all are doing or your members are doing. Maybe even your non-members are doing inside your community. We'd love to see all that sort of great stuff. And Aaron, I do want to see this handbook when it's done. Let us know how we can get access to that when it's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feel free to share some ideas. I think what we're getting at here is what are ways to encourage different conversation topics. So for instance, we work with a cancer immunotherapy site, SITC, and one of, the idea of their segmentation of their groups is funding, policy, research, right? So it's not just go talk, right? It's talk with purpose. And that's really important. And that will actually make a lot of what association analytics do have more weight to it and create more teeth, because it's not just, say, only an open forum. It is also this place to engage around specific topics that hit you personally, that you care about, that you want to learn about, or that you want to be an evangelist or expert for. Maybe all of the above. I think, as everybody would ideally agree, is that in both, there are many cases where I could be both a mentor and a mentee, depending on the scenario. With communities, I can help mentor people around community strategy, but around a totally different topic, I'm going to be brand new to it, right? And it could be related even. So, for instance, marketing automation, it's not really my expertise, and I can learn a lot around how some clients and some of my coworkers use marketing automation tools. I would be a mentee there, but a mentor around community. So that's something that we want to promote in the community, is that people can take on these different roles at different times.
Shout out for David Jovel. He's my marketing automation mentor. And Jill, let's pose this question to Billy. Jill said she doesn't have a community, but she posts on LinkedIn. Does Jill have a community?
Well, I would say LinkedIn has a community that you're leveraging. So it's kind of like, I would say I love using the social media sites, particularly LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is a business purpose. Facebook is purely social. LinkedIn does actually have a really good kind of business focus, whatever your business might be, association, corporate, or otherwise. So I'm a fan of LinkedIn by all means, but I like to use those social media sites as kind of that top of funnel, right, to engage people and pull them into what is in essence our resource in our community, because you don't own content on LinkedIn. You don't have analytics on LinkedIn. You don't own permissioning or control or automation on LinkedIn. You can't gamify LinkedIn, right? You can't get volunteers from it. I mean, you could ask for people to do something, but it's kind of like if you're staying in someone else's house, right? Like you have a room in someone else's house and you're a guest. It's a rough analogy, but go with it. I'm kind of thinking about it in real time. But you can kind of run your LinkedIn group, but it's really not your home, right? It's not branded for you. It's not controlled for you. So I love using it as that way to draw attention and then to link to, but pull users into what is essentially your community, where you can have a much broader discussion, where you can allow people to organize, because what happens in a lot of forums or a lot of social media is it's overwhelming. There's too much going on. And why 99-1 rule happens most often is because that 90% of users just don't know how they can contribute. It's like, I don't know, like advocates will, the 1%, because they're very motivated. But we can't focus only on the advocates at the expense of the other 99%. We need to address both audiences and say, right, so what would be a good way to reduce the amount of noise that's very overwhelming or hard to keep up with, and cater to that 90 to 99% so that they feel like they can have a voice too. And that just can't be done on social media, right? That needs to be an organized community that is around your brand and around your topic, because it takes a lot of the noise away and it helps us focus on your association or your company.
I think somebody referred to LinkedIn as a great outpost. It's a great outpost to get your message out there and pull people in. And let's use that as a transition for our next slide here, pulling people in. So sometimes this is referred to as a commitment curve or an engagement journey. But the end goal here, as we stated, is there may be many ways to enter the community. But once we've got you there, we want to captivate you. And we want to keep you there in the community engaging with us. and push you further. It's typically about escalating or asking for that next little thing. How can I get this member or this non-member to engage in that next level and bring them up? Because we know not everybody starts on the board of directors day one when they graduate from, you know, being a student member. But we need to work them up there, and we need to get them there. And I would venture to say that everybody on your board didn't start there as step one. They probably, you know, came to an event. They probably volunteered for a committee, and you probably escalated them up over time. And I would say community is a good place to do that, but it's a better place to track that.
Oh yeah, Greg, you're spot on. So we talked at the last slide about the use cases, but the idea of a journey is really not specific to any one use case. This is about each individual moving through that path, right? And that path might be different, but it is still a path. And so a lot of people refer to this as gamification, and I think gamification is wrongly often pigeonholed into badges, right? Which works for some and not for others. And that is a part of it. But really, gamification stems from a psychological approach to motivation. What motivates a user to take a particular action at a particular moment that they may not have taken before, or that they did not know to take, right? And so this is the intention of our journey and automation processes, so we can kind of baby step those users, particularly to Greg's point, the new users who don't know where to go. We can give them purpose. I like to call it my guidelines and guardrails, right? Like keep them on track, keep them focused, again, not too many distractions, and make it very easy for them, step by step, right? So that I don't need to be, you know, blogging the first day I join the community, but I'd like to see some of those other blogs that advocates have posted, and maybe join a group and get a digest, and maybe do these simple things that then work me up to creating content from consuming content and engaging in these different events and these different chapters. So there is more of a thoughtful process to what many, again, refer to as gamification than badges. And in fact, you know, badges are really only used for onboarding and the starting point as a retroactive kind of motivator, but in reality, it's going to be a lot more than that. It's going to be reminders, prompts, following users to groups that are relevant to them, personalizing content to them, because personalization plays a huge role in adoption. If you speak to me and where I am right now and what I care about, I'm going to be apt to engage way more than if you give me a particular type of badge, right? So this is something that we care quite a bit about, which is, you know, a member could mean a lot of different things. So let's make sure we speak to the member at the appropriate time with the appropriate language and actions.
All right, we've been speaking to our members. We asked a question. We got a lot of feedback and engagement on the first question. The second question, I was a little disappointed. We didn't get a whole lot of feedback and engagement. And then Lori shows up and absolutely crushes it with her answer here. What a great idea. This is why I love asking questions to the group, because you never know what you're going to get. Read the chat. That's a perfect idea from Lori. I love that concept. It doesn't have anything to do with community, but at the same time, it has everything to do with community. It doesn't push people to a value driver use case that generates revenue for you immediately, but it creates a sense of community, and that's the value driver you're getting at there. What a great idea. That's super cool.
I love the idea of just that social nature of things, right, Greg? Which is we want to have people see each other as people, right? And so whether it be employees or members or customers, I love that concept of let's just get people talking, and it's okay if it's not about anything in particular, or if it's not about a particular business or a product or an event. Like we have those groups too, but let's just get people talking and connecting as individuals and find a shared interest. I've seen a lot of brands do that really successfully. A lot of companies that did one thing, you know, and they wanted to get conversation started. There was a travel company I worked with before. They didn't do travel, but they created groups around travel. They were in hospitality. And they would create groups around like, where are you traveling and what are you going to eat when you're there? Like, where do you like to go if you go to Paris, right? What's your favorite spot? You know, where do you get X or Y, right? Like the best macaroons, like was the discussion. So those things weren't pertinent to that company's business, but they were to growing the relationships between the users. And what is so powerful about that is if we can create those relationships, those are those bonds that keep people coming back, and they don't want to lose access to that community, right? If I connect with Greg on there and I have a really meaningful, even if it's just online relationship, I'm going to be less likely to leave that community and leave that association because of that relationship I formed with up here.
Love it. Let's talk about some different community examples here. You want to walk us through some of these? And give me the nod for next one here.
Yeah, sure. I threw up a bunch of different sites just to show you the power of that personalization. QuickBase here is a client we work with. One of the things that's really great about a community solution, at least one like Higher Logic that focuses on personalization, is that no two sites should be the same. And that's not to mean we're reinventing the wheel. It just means that each audience is going to want to have something different focus on them. But strategically, we are actually going to build these sites, even though they look different, even though they're a representation of the brand and the solution in the event or the association in question. That's what I would call the theme, meaning it is yours in brand representation. But the strategic elements of each site are actually going to be very similar, even though they look slightly different, which is we want these landing pages to springboard users into some of those conversations we were talking about. We want them to focus on A, what messaging do we want to communicate out to them? B, what kind of key content do we want to have be a focal point? Meaning instead of just recent activity, so maybe hit the next one. I'm trying to think of which one I had. Oh, I like that one. Here, hit the next one. That one is a really great community.
This community.
Like instead of, yeah, Crayola. There's a lot, and this is actually a business community for Crayola, an educator community, which I love.
Just because I like to see what they talk about.
I know. Well, I like teacher communities in any form or fashion. So, and I like the STEAM plus art. Here's a good one. This is the new board community with one of our new templates out of the box. So messaging, key content, what do we want to focus on, and calls to action. That's probably the most important one. So some clients choose to have announcements and updates, and some don't. Board doesn't. They just have an image, and they're not trying to message anything in a hero banner, let's say. They are focusing on quick links and shortcuts, but the real key here is there's 3 easy prompts to connect inside of our discussion threads, share feedback and ideas, and then browse resources. I've seen people even make it simpler, where it's ask a question, share your thoughts, join a group. And it would be, say, a chapter group or a user group. So it doesn't need to be overly complicated. The landing page should really be a springboard and a representation of what do we think our users care about. So yes, it's our brand, but what do they care about? In this case, an executive association, right, focusing on things like what topics keep you up at night? AI, employee engagement, CSAT, right, outsourcing, right? What are those groups that we really want you to think are the most important inside of this community? And obviously, in a lot of these communities right now, I think the next one might be one, it's COVID, California Special Districts Association, and pretty much every site that I've shown you, if I were to click into a lot of those, one of the most popular groups right now is COVID readiness, COVID events, well, not directly COVID events, but events based off of our, online need to get and digitally connect. And so, but if I were to go through these, and we don't have time today, each and every one of them, you would see a lot of similarities around that mentality of let's speak a language that is not feature focused, right? That is not go to the forum, go to the knowledge base, go to the blog, but is really focused on, right, what do you care about? Membership, in this case, I like this one a lot. Membership, advocacy, resources, and news, right? It is simple calls to action. I like to think about a good community like my favorite news source itself, which is that it's going to be curated a little bit and personalized, right? So what's important right now? And then it allows me to jump into more specific aspects. So if I want to get into financial news, if I want to get into international news, if I want to get into sports or weather, right? It's totally up to me as the user right now, what do I care about, right? And so in this case, some of these sites have done that really effectively of paring down just here's a feed of activity and focusing on what we want to communicate as an organization and what we think the users can get value out of, and then having them easily be able to get into those resources.
Awesome. All right, let's tag over and talk about some analytics around community. So the first thing I want to talk about is the survey said it, that community traffic has increased. I'm not even going to ask the chat because I'm assuming everyone here with an online community has seen a significant increase in activities. So if we're measuring an increase of activities, just the fact that more activities happening isn't necessarily as important. Hey, Diana, good to see you in the chat there. It's really more like, let's break that down and let's find the intricacies of what's happening in the community. So the first thing a community manager you want to know is what communities are growing, what communities are shrinking. But at the same time, let's take off our community manager hat. The rest of you on the call, the 66%, go ask your community manager. You're going to take a bunch of notes. The community manager is going to love this. Go ask your community manager what groups are increasing in activity. Where do we see the largest increase in activity? Because you know what that tells me? That tells me those members are interested. Those members are engaged, and those members are looking for feedback. They're looking for information. They're looking for connections, and they're going into the online community to do that. What are the other ways that non-community managers can use that to facilitate those connections. So, okay, we've identified that groups are growing. Then my question is, what is growing in those groups? Are more people joining the group? Are more people updating their profile in the group? Are more people having discussions? Are they downloading files? If they're downloading files, what was that document that was highly downloaded last week? And why was that so important? Now, we always focus so much on profile activity with community analytics. And somebody asked me, like, why do we care that much about people updating their profile? Billy, do you have any thoughts on, like, why do we care about profiles?
I mean, I personally think the user is the center of everything, right? That's why I kind of made that circle graphic. And so the profiles are important because they represent your, like, meaning, again, go back to the point earlier, good content is coming from someone, right? The content's good, but who wrote that content, right? I want to know the mind behind that, and I want to connect with that individual. And again, kind of like we talked about, if I connect with you as Gregg, right, that's going to be a more powerful relationship to the community and the association than if I connect with a blog that you wrote. Not that it's not important, but it's going to be more powerful. So, I mean, profiles are everything in my opinion. They really help with driving expertise location, but more importantly, just humanizing the entire process. And if users aren't filling out their profiles, then what else aren't they doing too, right? There's a disengagement. The profile is such an easy thing and such a representation of ourselves. It's kind of like if you don't fill out your LinkedIn profile, do you care about networking on there, right? It's no different.
Perfect example. So for the community manager, let's make that an early stopping point in their journey. Update your profile. And then for the rest of you, how do you leverage the community profile information for the rest of your organization? Do you ever find volunteers based on their profile or interest? What about when you send out marketing calls to action? Are you leveraging the interests people have stated inside their online community for when you send that email out? I know a bunch of people who do that, and they've seen tremendous success in reducing the noise. Because I think one of the marketing metrics we look at the least is opt-outs. And I think opt-outs is a strong marketing metric that says these people are tuning your message out. And one of the ways we can reduce opt-outs is by personalizing that content. So how do you leverage the content in the community's profile to say, we know Billy, we know what Billy likes. Billy likes this sort of stuff. Hey, we have an event related to that. How do we get that event in front of Billy? So as we're looking at this from a non-community standpoint, if you're not the community manager, go find out what profile information you're capturing. Go find out what behavioral information you're capturing on those people. Use it for events, use it for marketing, for volunteers, for finding committee leaders, for that next speaker you're looking for. We're going to talk about that in a second about finding speakers, but I think there's a lot of great ideas in there. So we've got these new people joining the community, and you probably want to know who those new people are. So when we look at community churn, we look at people who are joining the community, and then we look at the breakdown of those people who are joining the community. Now I'm going to bring up a community management topic called seed questions. Billy, I'm surprising you with so many good things today. What's a seed question and why is it so important for our non-community managers to understand what that is?
You mean kind of how we might popcorn a discussion to general users?
Yes,
I mean, it's so important.
Users.
Yeah, particularly, so think about, I have an idea, I want to create a new group, new chapter or new event group. And I just say, okay, cool, I'm going to call this group our COVID readiness group, just to stick with the topic that we've been on. Now I launched it. There's nothing in it, right? Be like, Gregg, let me show you to your room, and there's no furniture in that room. You know, like, what are you going to do? Well, I guess you could do anything with it, but it's not really your job to start that conversation, unless you're that 1%er that's a real go-getter, and probably even like half of that percent would do it. The seeding is really important. It sets the stage, right? I like to call it, again, you might all notice I have a lot of house analogies. Maybe I watch too much HGTV, but staging a house is really important, right? I've never been a realtor, but I know it's really important to make sure that we give people an idea of what the foundation of this should look like, or inspire them to think outside of maybe the structure of a certain particular place. So while you might give a group a name and say, this is about COVID readiness, seeding questions or any content for that matter, even if it's just a little bit, just lightly starting a conversation, it creates, again, a lower barrier to entry. And that's really what we're aiming to do. Reduce the barrier for those new users, or even users that want to help, but they're just not sure how to start. And so starting that conversation allows them to comment on it and piggyback on something that already exists. And that's just a lot easier for them. And then that creates a structure for what we expect within a community group as well.
So let's take my community manager hat off. if I just learned that a ton of people joined the online community, and now I know who they are and the breakdown of those people, that can fill in some gaps for me. Well, we just canceled an event, and instead of going to the physical event, they went online and started talking about this. Or, you know, we were looking at our online learning and we're looking at virtualizing more content. A ton of people just came and joined our virtual groups and started asking these questions and talking about these things. What sort of topic would you imagine they'd be interested in learning? Let's go create that content and get it in front of them. So then talking about searching, searching is so important because as we talked about the 99-1 rule, you know what those 90% of people are doing? They're not just lurking, they're searching. And as much as we want to break down what are the topics people are talking about, we certainly want to see the discussion name, who started it, who replied, that's important. But the searching can give us more insight into the lurkers. So when I look at search terms over time, my first thought is, well, if a lot of people are searching for this, we should probably have an AMA around that topic pretty soon. If you're not familiar, AMA stands for Ask Me Anything. It's the idea where we bring an expert speaker like Billy in, and I pepper him with unknown questions about community for an hour and watch him answer them. And it provides a lot of value for the community and a lot of insight for all of you on the call. Now, for those non-community managers on today, we're going to give the chat another shot here. If you were to find a really popular search term in your community, besides the obvious, besides COVID, besides coronavirus, if you were to discover your members all of a sudden started talking about X, what would you do with that information? And I don't want to give too many answers of what I think. So type in the chat, if you had a really hot topic come up, what would you do with that information within your association? Now I'm going to bring up a topic here as we get the answers to roll in called fast data. Fast data is so critical because the idea is the search term that happens right now isn't relevant in 9 months. It doesn't matter anymore what Billy searched for, it's gone, right? When you're trying to renovate your house and you're looking for that one specific thing you need at Home Depot, I can't show you an ad on Facebook 6 months later for that product. You've already bought it, you've already finished the repair on your house, you're not worried about that concept anymore. So what is that thing that you would love to do with that topic that's hot in the community? So here we've got blog post, love it, create some content in front of people. Webinar, white paper, Robin's nothing, that's fine with me. I talk to a lot of those people. It could potentially be in a webinar or a podcast, a town hall or a Zoom meeting, love it, networking with peers, educational sessions. Here's one that I really like, and I think this is so underrated. Jill jumps in again. Dig around our magazine and past webinars to see if we have anything on it and share it. I always think of associations, they have this sort of virtual shelf of all this content that's getting dusty because it's buried 15 pages down on the website, or it's on that old portal that's not live anymore. I've been to so many of your offices where you literally have a library with dusty content in it. Go find the relevant content based on that term. You've already got it. You've already produced it. You paid the effort of creating that content. Let's repurpose it and get it in front of people because it's fresh. And I think that's such a great idea, is how do we take the existing relevant content we have and get it in front of the members who are looking for that content right now.
Yeah, and if it's in the community, Greg, right, go mention that user who's searching for it, or bring it back into a new group, or maybe it's a topic that lives in some other busy space, and you say, now this is going to be its own area. This is a big enough topic, right, that should actually exist and be a resource hub in and of itself. So that can allow you to move things around and bring people into content because it's always available.
I fully agree with that. One thing that I used to get pushback on when I talked to community all the time was, should we really start with one open forum, just one community? Are you sure that's going to work? But we have 19 chapters and 23 SIGs and 55 events every year. Shouldn't we have 400 communities when we launch? And my answer is typically no. You should have one community when you launch. But there is going to be that tipping point where we do start to subdivide. We're not talking about community management strategies today. Go learn about why you should have one open forum and then subdivide. But the idea is data leads you to the answer of when you should subdivide, right? When do I take my open forum and split it into 5 different communities? Data is going to be the answer to that. I don't know when you should do it, but you should look at the data and it will tell you when enough topics are being talked about that are diverse. When we stop talking about home repairs and we start talking about car repairs, guess what? We've got 2 topic communities now that we can start subdividing people on. But then,
yeah, it's definitely more of an art, right, Greg? I mean,
oh yeah,
it's an art, not a science, with any community because everybody's different. So I'm definitely of the mind I like, multiple groups, but I don't like too many. So, you know, and even in my own space of community managers, even those at Higher Logic, we disagree on this topic. But Gregg's right. If there's too many, it dilutes. It absolutely does. And there's a couple people in every group, and there's not a lot of conversations going on, because why are you surprised? We've created 50 groups that probably are better as tags, right? And dog ears instead of an entire community or sub-community. But then, yeah, when there's too few spaces, it can create a lot of noise. So there's a wonderful happy medium, and Gregg's right. The analytics will drive that. Part of it you can already start to consider, but the more you learn, the more you can start to create those groups.
Love it. So we talked about our non-community manager hat and what would you do with the data and fast data. We also want to think, how do we personalize that experience in other channels we have? So it's not just about what are people talking about, it's what are sections of people talking about. The beauty, as Billy said earlier, of owning your own communities, you can control access, you can make it single sign-on, and you can tie that access to your database. So I know when Gregg logs into the community, what type of member he is, what job level he is, what purchases he's made, and I can tie that back to what he's looking for in the community. So for those of you on the call who sell things to your members, how do you leverage community data to sell the right thing to the right member who's interested in it? How do we necessarily target, you know, Gregg should buy this product because people of this demographic are talking about it right now in our community. How do we position that content in front of him? Or for those of you who run events, how do we find the right virtual event to take this specific space or this specific demographic and fill that use case? Good question. I don't know the answer. All right.
Yeah, I was just gonna answer. So Leah, you asked, what is the average age? Gregg, this will be posted, this webinar online. That's what Maria asked.
Yeah,
awesome.
We're gonna post
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. And then Leah, yeah, I mean, honestly, I've seen it all ages. You know, I've worked with communities with very young users and worked with communities that are retirees, right? And everything in between. Some communities really span all ages, right? And a lot of the communities we work with, they're not age specific, but plenty of them, like a lot of the teachers communities we have, or some of the manufacturing communities I've worked with, the majority of the audience is older. And then, you know, we've worked with a lot of nonprofits where the audience is extremely young. It's really more than wow, over 100. Wow. You know, my grandma's on Facebook now, so I think honestly, and if you knew her, which you don't, that is very surprising. But it's just random anecdote that's personal that nobody gets. But the intention is really that psychologically, I know that there are age ranges that will be more apt to adopt online services, but I think we're getting to a point where that's becoming less and less of an issue. And I think no matter what, if you provide value, the age shouldn't matter, right? Assuming that we provide accessibility and things that people need in certain age brackets, that the value of and the resource of the community will supersede any kind of unfamiliarity with technology. Now, there's, you know, it's a larger topic, but trust me, I have seen communities with very high adoption with pretty much every age range.
I would say don't go in with a preconceived notion that these people
Absolutely.
are X, thus they won't do Y. Give them an opportunity to do it, and then give them the accessibility to make it easy for them to do it how they like to interact. So that might mean an app, that might mean a website, that might mean a text version, it might mean screen readers, an ADA compliance on your website, so you know, you can use it with screen readers. It may mean a daily digest. I know Higher Logic has the daily digest, and that's one of the primary ways people interface with it. It's also one of the primary ways people start getting it, is we don't necessarily have to wait for them to come to the community, we can bring it to them. So as far as age goes, I've seen it all over the board. It's all about value. It's if we can provide value for those people, we can provide a space for them to interact, and as long as we're making it accessible to them, we're good to go.
Yeah, and keep it simple no matter what. Yeah, retired members. You know, I work with a client who, two of their clients are Boeing and NASA. And it's a very technical community in nature, meaning a lot of those people are coming in, they're literally designing rocket ships. Their site is so simple, right? You would look at it and you'd be like, oh, there's just like 4 places to go. Here's what it is. Like it's like that site I showed earlier with Gregg with the 3 buttons. It's really simple. So again, going back to that point, right? That's a good strategy, that it doesn't really matter that I'm dealing with a literal rocket scientist, or if I'm dealing with, you know, a teacher, or if I'm dealing with a retiree. Simplicity is key. Personalization is key.
Yep, perfect. Love it. Now, if we go back to that, let the data tell you what's working and not working. Fun anecdote is we were running a community for bank CEOs and CFOs. Now think about a bank CEO and CFO, right? You get your personality, you get your suit and tie on. You're busy person, you know, making deals left and right. I don't know what they do. And we noticed that they weren't posting in the community. So we were looking at the data and we were looking at our assumption of what we wanted them to do. Our assumption was we wanted them to post questions in the community. And looking at the data, they just weren't doing it. And the customer was getting a little upset. They were like, you guys told me people would post in the community. And we're like, hold up, let's continue to look at the data. And we noticed that there were people who were logging in on a weekly basis and they were doing things. And we literally picked up the phone and called the bank CEO and we said, why aren't you posting in the online community? And she said, I don't want to post in the community. That's not what I derive value from this community. The value I get from this community is listening to the thought leadership you're providing. I log in on a weekly basis and I read the posts. I log in on a weekly basis and I download the latest document and I listen to the podcast you upload. That's what I want out of your community. Stop telling me to post in your community. That's not the value I'm looking for. So what we did is we retuned the community. We changed the homepage. We removed the discussions. We put the documents up there. We tagged the podcast on the homepage. And we said, listen, this is what you want out of a community. We're going to provide that for you. Now, on the surface, we missed that, right? We were just looking at the discussions going, where is everybody? But when we dug deeper into the analytics, we were able to find what the value from the community was those people were actually deriving. Real story. All right, let's talk about this one right here. This is pretty cool. Does anybody know what this is? Throw it in the chat if you have an idea of what this is. What is this on the screen right here? Anybody?
I know the answer, but I'm not going to answer.
Communication mapping. That's it. So this is a network map. And the idea is each one of these dots is a person, and the lines connect the dots with each other. Now, as a community manager, we're wearing our two hats today. As a community manager, this is gold. I know who my centers of influence are. I know that if I want to have a seed question, and by the way, most of the time the community manager doesn't post the seed question. The community manager reaches out to this person right here in the, I don't know if you can see my mouse, in the middle, and they ask that person to post the seed question. This way it seems more natural. I hope I didn't blow your world that seed questions exist. But understanding where your centers of influence exist in the world can be huge to understanding how to get your community going or how to get a community that stalls moving forward. Now, the other thing I think of when I see this is communities will have negative posters. This will occur. It is okay when this occurs. It's not the end of the world. And the first thing you should not do is delete that post. Don't delete it. It'll get way worse when you delete that negative post. What you need to do is when you have a negative person in your community, you need to reach out to one of your centers of influence and push that negative person in the right direction. This is a great opportunity to understand why they're negative, what we can do to help them, because if they're negative in your community, it's because they care. Most of the time, they care about what's going on and they're just expressing it in a different way than most people would. How do we get one of our centers of influence to then jump in and say, you know, what's really going on here? How do we get to the bottom of this? And let's really explain what's happening and try and turn that detractor into a promoter. Now, if I take off my community manager hat and I put on my membership, marketing, events, finance, government relations hat, if I put on any of those other roles that we play with in the association, and I look at this, there's so much insight I can get from this, right? I need this member to go to Congress and testify. Well, if you know who their best friend is, you don't ask them, you get your best friend to ask them, right? I'm looking for a speaker who can really draw a good audience in. Should I pick one of the people on the periphery, or should I pick one of these people that's a major center of influence? So if you had access to this, what would you do with this? We talked about sort of what sort of things would you do with your community, but outside of the community, if you had access to this information, she's a real person. Amy, if you're on the call, or if you know Amy, I apologize for picking you out of the blue. I randomly clicked on her yesterday when I was taking screenshots. If you knew Amy, and you knew Amy's sphere of influence and who she was connected to, how could you leverage that information to better run your organization, to better get to the goals you're looking for? How do I find the people in Amy's sphere of influence and then connect them in with my goals? Because ultimately, They're the association goals. And if I can understand how those connections work, I can make a huge difference in the outcomes of my online community, but I can also make a huge difference in my speakers. Reggie Henry came on with a great idea a couple weeks ago. He said, ask one of your members to tweet out the session and then ask those members to retweet it. Well, if I can reach Amy and ask her to tweet this out, I've got 15 people right here who are automatically connected in with that content. And when they retweet it, there's now 100 people that are connected in with that content. So what a valuable tool this can lead to is we can understand where the centers of influence are and how people are connected. We can understand what's going on.
This, by the way, as someone that's seen a lot of communities play, this is so amazing because, you know, if any of you have used the Higher Logic tool and you've used, say, volunteer opportunities, you know there's a nominate button, right? And that is such an important thing. We refer to that as meta knowledge, meaning I don't always need to reach Gregg if Gregg's the expert. I sometimes will get what I want by reaching someone that knows Gregg. So someone might nominate Gregg, and that's still a win. This makes it even easier because you don't need to wait around for that nomination. You already know that John knows Amy, right? And so we can get to Amy directly, and we can ask Amy to be that influencer for us because we already know how many people are connected to her. So this really, obviously people are still able to nominate each other and reference and @mention, but this makes your life as a community manager or someone running events or marketing or membership a lot quicker to get to the meat of who are the people that are really going to have an impact. I don't need to wait around to try to figure that out.
Not something for today's call, but I really want to know what's going on down here where these people aren't connected at all, but they're really connected with each other. And I love how you have like this big center.
The social distancing.
It's like, who is this connected over here? There's this one connection. This person knows tons of people and this person knows tons of people, but they don't know any of the same people. I think those sort of insights are so cool. I could spend all day looking at this. And then I think about when we get to the physical trade show, like these are the clicks in the hallway, right? These are the, oh, I know that person and that person knows this person, but none of these people know that person. Like this is the digital representation of that of that hallway we see at the conference center. Sentiment analysis. Now, sentiment analysis is an emerging technology for analytics. This is one of those things that's getting better every time we run the sentiment analysis through. But as a community manager, you can't read every post, right? It's just not possible. You can't moderate every post. There's too much content in there. But we can identify what's positive, what's tagged as negative, and what's tagged as neutral. And then as a non-community manager, just understanding the sentiment of the community, the breakdown of each of your groups. Where are your really positive groups? What topics are trending as a positive topic? And what topics are trending as a negative topic? So often we hear at the conference on Twitter that it's really cold at the conference center and we need to bring a sweater. And that could be flagged as a negative post. And that might be a center of negativity. But at the same time, that's a great opportunity to say, hey, we have a swag shop over here. You can buy a sweater and it's got our logo on it. I'll even give you a coupon for complaining about how cold it is. Guess what I've got? I've now got a picture of one of my promoters on social media rocking my swag, saying how much they love my brand, and I've got a champion for life. So I think identifying sentiment can be a great way to find out what we need to act on. What are the really positive things we need to celebrate, and what are the things that are tagged as negative we need to address?
And one big point on this, and Gregg, you were talking about it earlier too, with the negativity, the flagging, the negative comment. I will 100% always take a negative poster over someone who's disengaged, always. Now, obviously, in a perfect world, nobody posts anything negative, but that's not reality. But to Gregg's point earlier, I can resolve that problem, and I can ideally resolve that problem publicly. So not only can I make it better if I know that there's a problem where someone that's disengaged is, you know, fuming quietly, I can't know that's happening as well, if at all. I can't resolve it. And so whether it be an idea that you actually, so a positive piece of feedback that then you implement, that's a great way to promote that. Or whether it's a negative or a confusing topic that you resolve, that then continues to reinforce the community as a resource center and as a resolution to any issues, and that you are listening and you are creating that dialogue and you're resolving problems. All of it is good for your association or organization. So I say I always welcome negative comments, again, assuming they're not like wildly inappropriate and then they get flagged. But if they're not that, right, bring that criticism, that's a better word, because I am happy to help get to the bottom of it and fix it.
Jill, I don't have an answer for you about the chicken. To be honest, I feel like I've been to hundreds of trades
Chicken.
at this point. And I don't think I ever remember there being a fantastic food option at any trade show I've ever been to.
It's always chicken, isn't it? Like chicken and fish. Yeah, unless you're vegetarian.
Maybe a sandwich would be with my day. All right.
Yeah, sandwich would be great.
We're running out of time. It's 4 o'clock, top of the hour. We're going to keep going. If you want to stick with us, hang out, and we're going to cover 1 or 2 more slides. And then if you want to stick with us, if you're the hardcore 9 or 1%ers and you want to jump on, we're gonna open it up for guest panelists. If you want to have a surprise panelist and ask a question or make a point or disagree with us, Billy and I are going to try and hang out as long as we can with you today. As long as you're engaged, we're going to be engaged within reason. So much so far, we've talked about the community metrics, how the community metrics impact the community manager, and how the community metrics impacts the larger organization as a whole. I saw this question asked in Hug earlier today is, how do you prove the ROI of your community? And she's already starting to get answers on that one. But I think the real answer is, to prove the ROI of your community data has to mingle with your association data. This is the only way to do it, right? If we need to understand, do people in the community participate more in the rest of our stuff, or do they renew at a higher level, or do they spend at a higher level? We need to understand who's participating in the community, and what those people in the community do outside of the community. Shout out to Diana. I saw her on the chat a while ago. She did one of the first sessions about this with Liam probably 6 years ago, called Everything and the Kitchen Sink and Everything Else. I forget the title. It was a great session talking about sending your community data back to your AMS. But ultimately, that's where the proof is in for the community manager. So often I feel bad for community managers because they say, look at all these great discussion posts we have, but they can't necessarily say these discussion posts led Billy to renew as a member. These discussion posts on average led Billy to spend more with our organization. Participating in the community made somebody less likely to submit a ticket, or participating in the community led to this person being on this committee. So I think the end goal of analytics for your community is helping that community manager justify the hard work they're doing and prove to the rest of the team in data analytics that what we're doing is valuable. When we go to the leadership and we say, we need to double down on our community, we need to hire another community manager, we need to expand what we're doing out beyond our typical community, that's where these analytics come into play. And then as we blend that community activity with all the other activities in our organization, we can ultimately get a true view of engagement. Sorry, reading the chat here. Yeah, I'm really excited as well. We're gonna make you be a panelist in not too long. Don't worry about it. So I think at the end of the day, the real value is having a highly engaged community, expanding the use cases of your community beyond just something the community manager does. I want everybody in the organization to find a reason to use the online community to augment what you're doing, whether it's events, which seems obvious, education seems pretty simple, but advocacy, volunteering, virtual committees, ideation, all those blogs and content, all those other things your association does, I want you to think about how the community can help you do that. And I want you to think about the flip side, is how can the community help you do your job? What insight can the community provide for you that would be highly valuable for you to know? If you could go to your community manager and say, tell me the top people, tell me the people who fall into this bucket, tell me the people who engaged in this call to action, how could you leverage that data to be more successful at what you're doing? So I challenge everybody on the call today, expand your use cases of community. Right now is a perfect time to do it. And all those people on the call who aren't the community manager, go talk to that community manager tomorrow, next week. Go spend some time with them and say, there's gold in this community. I need you to help me mine it. Help me understand what's happening. Help me understand how I can use the data from the community to be better at my job. All right, we're gonna tag Bill in for a quick commercial. And if you're still hanging out and chatting, we'll still be here to answer your questions when we get back.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks to the panelists and especially the audience for all the great comments. I hope you can join us for future discussion. A couple quick logistics. You guys probably know this is a recurring meeting, which means that if you sign up for one, you're probably signed up through the end of July. You'll get weekly reminders that'll give you instructions on how to get this on your calendar if it's not already there. We put the link in the chat earlier, but if you're unable to attend a future event, you can always get the recordings on our site. It's associationanalytics.com/virtual. Next week, for the next installment in our series, we're going to dive into marketing and marketing analytics. So it's going to be how to plan, execute, and measure your marketing strategies. And we'll give you some specific pro tips on how to build a solid marketing technology stack on any budget. So thanks again for a great discussion. If anybody wants to stick around, Greg and Billy will answer some more questions. Hope your minds are full and your cups are empty, and we hope to see you next week. So have a great day, everyone.
Thanks a lot for everybody for joining us. If there was anything that you wanted to bring up we didn't cover, if you ask a question and we forgot about it, or if there's anything we didn't cover you'd like to talk about related to community and data, drop it in the chat. If you want to be so bold as to show up and share your face with the rest of the world here and ask a question or answer a question, let us know. We had a session a couple weeks ago where we went 30 minutes long. We had people from the audience jump in. Data is cool and nerdy at the same time, and that's okay. We're allowed to be nerds in 2020. Being nerdy is now cool. Yeah, so if anybody has an additional question, concept they want us to unpack, or wants to hop on a soapbox and talk about what they want to talk about, now's a great time. Drop it in the chat. Let us know, and we'll be happy to promote you and have you show up. Is there a job description for a community manager? Yes, there is. Billy, how could I get a job description for a community manager?
Yeah, we actually have a few different ones, so I could send it to you, you know, a little detail if, Greg, if you want to send me Maureen's information, because we actually have a team, like HireLogic employs 20 to 30 full-time community managers, more than any company in our space. So we have our own job description, and then we have ones that we share out because a lot of our clients hire their own. So happy to share that if you want to pass me Maureen's information, for sure.
I think, didn't the Community Roundtable do a report a couple years ago on community managers and salaries and roles and training and all that sort of stuff? That might be a good guide.
Yes, there is third-party stuff. Yep. Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of detail. Obviously, it will depend on the use case, but as you can imagine, it's about managing, moderating, seeding content, right? Working on things like how we build out the automation rules day to day and how we oversee that moderation. You know, I like to think of a good community manager as kind of the host or hostess or gatekeeper, sometimes both, right? They play that face of the community. They communicate out things from internal needs, but also bring feedback in and spread out, like Greg said, to these other departments. So for instance, when I work with a corporate client, right, a lot of the community managers are communicating with product on ideation, marketing on events, support on support, right? There's a lot of people that they touch internally, but they are that kind of entry point to the customers, and what they do from a day-to-day basis, we can absolutely detail that out for you.
I'd like to answer this question. I want Billy to answer these questions because I have a fairly good opinion that most people haven't met Billy yet, and he's a wealth of community knowledge, and he probably brings a different perspective than you're used to around community. So how do you how do you get your community members educated about communities and excited to use the platform? And you only have 1 or 2 minutes to answer that. Sorry, this isn't a whole hour you get.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean I mean, I know it sounds repetitive. It's about value, but I will always suggest having kind of a getting started space. So again, create some structure. So you might start with an open forum, but I'd suggest having a couple other maybe like onboarding type spaces or sub communities, as I like to call them. But creating kind of that model of explaining the community simply, right? What is the purpose? Like we talked about, your news source or having that onboarding process. And it's not just automation. It really is kind of a getting started menu. One of the things I love about that Crayola site is when I log in, I'm presented with, hey, welcome, Billy. Your profile is 70% complete. And here's some getting started things that you can do. They're giving me easy actions. Again, it's all easy stuff. So while they're also showing me key assets, things that are really important, again, not just latest activity. Latest activity is really nice to show that there is, in fact, activity. That's a good thing. But what's the best stuff, right? What do you want me to know about right now? What's upcoming? What did someone blog about, right? Who's your top member? Who should I go to? That kind of stuff is really key, but also just, again, speaking to me and understanding what can I do, right? Where can I go? And that is really important. Again, I know we kind of talked about it before, but I cannot overemphasize it enough, is that the more simple we make it, But the more we personalize that experience to new users who are in the community, which is purpose, focus on key content, and then calls to action, that's going to be your best bet to success. And then when we get into more of the later term users that have been with us for a long time, getting them more into that kind of advocate program, or getting them to take actions more like creation of content and attendance on events and hosting of events and ownership of group chapters, things like that. We could talk about what advocates do, but I think first and foremost, and it does necessitate more time. Sorry, Greg, I know it's only like 1 or 2 minutes, but, you know, really focusing on kind of put yourself in their shoes and how would you like to kind of be presented with community value and community actions.
Have a dedicated community manager. Just do it.
100%.
Just do it.
Yep.
Diana, I want to answer your question, and I'm going to give a controversial answer. There's your din din din. But before we do that, what do you suggest about staff managing or not the chapter communities? So we have chapter communities. Should we have staff in there poking around and managing? Is that a good idea, or should we just let it go and let them run it?
Are you asking me, Greg, or Diana?
Yeah.
I think it depends. I really like, so I've worked with a lot of user groups, and sometimes like when I worked with, you know, Marketo, they had user groups all over the world, you know, 50 to 100 user groups, because they had them city by city and broken out, you know, Tokyo, Berlin, Paris, Chicago, you name it. I can just say other names of cities with no end. But, you know, they can't manage all of that, right? And those are really good examples where those groups will be smaller, and that's okay, because there's, you know, we're not going to have everybody in the Paris group because not everybody's in Paris, right? So we need to make sure that they are allowed to, I don't want to say anything is managed by itself, right, off on an island, right? Because we want to understand what the activity is. And this is where association analytics comes in. It's so important because you can't manually go in every single day to all these groups. You want to understand the activity overall. But that's where I really like using the functional aspect of what we call group manager, where I might say, Greg, you're one of our advocates in Paris, right? I want you to help manage this group. And managing a group is not a full-time job, obviously, because it's just one area. You know, I kind of, again, to use an analogy, right? Your community manager is the principal. Maybe Greg is the teacher in one of those classrooms. So he now can oversee events in that group. He can moderate content, which he probably won't need to do very much. He can seed questions, right? And he can help answer questions or edit things when needed. And that will be, you know, pretty part-time. But at least there's someone I know that I trust to help oversee that group. He's one of my advocates, one of the people that I go to, one of the people I trust. So I highly recommend using group managers in those particular situations and use cases. And then you could focus on the key groups, the big groups that are going to be covering all users.
And then, hey, how about a group for people who manage groups?
Yeah, well, an advisory board is what I would probably call that, or, you know, I love that use case. And as long as your system in question, like HireLogic does, has the ability to have permissioning, meaning not everybody should see everything, as we all know. So when we create a community, an advisory board, or whatever the term, like we call ours our advisory council, the term doesn't matter here. It's wherever we want to kind of cherry pick some of those users, like Greg in this analogy, and pull them aside and have conversations with them, both for our own beneficial feedback with top users, but also what they're doing out in the community and what we want to ask them to do. That should be a private conversation, right, that we have with our top members, or maybe even your own team, right? A lot of companies I work with, both for-profit, nonprofits, and associations, don't actually have an interactive modern intranet. They use chat and they use email, right? So they don't actually have a way to collaborate with themselves, because, by the way, email is a great alert system. It is a horrible collaboration tool. Chat is great for when I'm online, but let's say, you know, Greg's 3 hours ahead of me. He's off, you know, with his family doing something tonight. I'm still working at 3 p.m., right? I need an answer now. That's not super, you know, chat is not necessarily always the end-all be-all, and things get lost really easily. So also creating not only an advocate area, but an employee area or multiple employee areas, and being able to cordon those off and say, only this type of user can access this, creates a lot of that area where you can prepare things, pre-seed content, discuss topics that are really important amongst yourselves and amongst your top users. So I love that, Greg. I think everybody should be doing that if they're not already. Use it to your advantage if you have a community. Otherwise, I would say you're not using it to its full potential.
All right, we had a question about critical mass. Billy, I want you to answer that in a second, but I do want to tackle Diana's question here, because this is a really important question. I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to give you my opinion, and it's going to be a little controversial. That makes events like this fun for me. So the question really is, in the community, there's lots of activities that are happening, and you can take that activity, and it's called activity sync. You can send that to other places, and you can certainly send every activity to your database, just as an activity. Or you can send those activities into Acumen for analytical purposes. Now, here's my thought behind this. There's only so much the human brain can process when looking at a record in a CRM, right? What are the critical things that the human needs to know upon utilizing that record in the CRM? So my use case here is like, we get a phone call, it's a member, and I looked them up in the CRM. Hey, Billy, I noticed you're a member and you've been a member since 2010. We love your support. What are the real quick things I need to know? And what can my brain process? I'll give you some really extreme examples. Billy made his first post and it was about this. You should totally write that to the CRM. That's going to be important information. Billy logged in 15 times, looked at 500 pages and downloaded 34 documents, earning 92 points. That's way too much for the human to process. That is what really should go into the data lake, right? That's the unstructured data that's too big for a CRM to handle. It's not the right sort of stuff to put in there. And I've talked with so many people who jam that stuff in their database and then they can't get it out in meaningful ways. The transactional database is really good at transactions. The data lake is really good at storing unstructured data. So there are multiple external systems that should feed into your CRM, and you should know what events I've gone to. You should know what purchases I've made. You should probably know what major emails I've interacted with or clicked on, but you probably shouldn't know every email I've ever opened or every website I've ever gone to on your properties. Those sort of things I think should go in the data lake.
I love that. What Greg's talking about is context, right? Like in Higher Logic, we have a lot of raw reports. They'll show you there's 10,000 discussions over the last month. Great. What were they about, right? Like what were people talking about? The data lake is so important to put structure around it, and context is so important to understand how your community is doing, positive, negative, neutral, where are they spending their time, how long are they spending their time on there, what topics are they talking about. It's not enough to just know raw reports, and that's why we have this partnership that I'm so excited about. And then you had the question about critical mass, and again, I hate to give this answer again, but it does depend. I've seen a variety of things depending on the use case. So for instance, when we have a support type community where there's this, if you think about support or help or the problem of it, it's very knee-jerk, like it's a very immediate need, right? That you have to like, something is broken, I need to know how to upgrade this or get this membership or, you know, get a ticket to this, or again, just giving random examples, but it's a very immediate kind of visceral need. Like I have to solve this now. And so a lot of times when that's a use case, we see a pretty quick uptick because users don't have that oftentimes. And then they see there's this resource and then they go immediately to it. Almost as I like to call it a tier zero. Instead of calling or opening a case or a ticket, right? They can now reference something centralized and they can help each other. And so we see a quick uptick there. And then there's use cases that are a little bit more longer term. So I'll say the education and support is maybe, 0 to 6 months. And then 6 to 9 is going to be more of what, a lot of marketing teams work on. Advocacy, as I'm sure most of you would agree, advocates are not born, you make them. Experts, you might have some now, we want more of them, right? Remember the 1% into the 5%? Yeah, that doesn't just happen. So that takes time. And so it depends on the use case. In the case of advocacy, critical mass might be more 6 to 9 to 12 months as we start to build a relationship that's a little bit more on demand in a way, I guess. It's always there, it's always present in the community. But as we build that trust and that network over time, then we're going to actually create more advocates. I don't think it's a numbers game though. Again, I've launched tiny communities. I launched a community for women in the energy industry before called Pink Petro. And there was literally 0 people. It was an idea that the founder had, a great idea, because that industry was very male dominated. And she had this great idea, but she launched the community with the concept that people would come, but we didn't know if they would at first, right? So there was nobody. And then it started off with a couple hundred people. And then I've worked with, we're working with HP right now, which is totally different. Most of the people I work with are in between those two extremes. But it's really not about whether you have 100 or 100,000. It's going to be about what that ratio of engagement is. So even outside of the use cases, what Gregg started with, that's what we focus on. Out of the 100, what percentage is creating content? What percentage is participating in content? what percentage is lurking, and then I guess a fourth category could be someone that hasn't logged in at all, right? Disengaged. And then whether it's 100 or 100,000, I always care about that ratio, right? And we want to make sure that we can get that many people in. And so again, that's why I think it's great to blend the use cases, have that open discussion area, have that education area, have that chapter, and have that event, is because they can play off each other, where some might be more of like blips every so often. If you can see me, they might be more spread out. Like support could be, you know, every month, maybe once a month, or once every 3 months. An event is once a year, and we want to drive adoption after the event. Like after we have our super forum event, we obviously want to drive adoption, but 6 months after the event, it's going to be less so than around the event. But something like best practices and strategies and user groups, that's going to be a little bit more common. So you're going to see a need to talk about strategy all the time and membership all the time. So I think it's a mix. And if we do it correctly, and if we create a hub instead of a one-off or a forum, then we can actually see things pick up upon that initial launch and then ideally sustain instead of pick up and then drop off. We don't want a bell curve, and that happens too often with forums.
So unfortunately, there's no answer. It's different for every community.
I mean, really, a community is. I mean, you're right, Greg. I mean, I know that's hard to explain sometimes because it does change with every client I'm talking to. But a community is, you know, a very malleable thing, and it's all carrot and no stick. You've heard me say that before, Greg. We can't make people use it. We have to encourage them. So unlike with a linear process like an ERP system or a CRM, let's run this report. If this comes in as a member or an AMS system, then this happens. That's a very simple process. Project management, things like that. Community is the exact opposite, right? It's all a psychological experiment. It's all ad hoc. It's really kind of tools like that inverse and flipped inside out. And so that's why it's harder, is because it's about the relationships. And the technology, again, buoys that, but it's really 10% technology, 90% strategy. And that's what I love, again, about, you know, when I work with association analytics, is it gives me the strategy on the data. It's not just data. It's so much more than that.
So while we can't say there's a definite answer of how long it should take, I would say there are things we can do to get a better shot at it. There's staffing we can provide. Yep. There's strategy we can provide. There's buy-in from the overall organization we can provide, and there's buy-in from leadership within the organization we can buy. Aligning those things with your community launch and the sustainability of your community is going to help you get to critical mass faster, easier, and ensure you get there. So by all means, have a community manager, whether it's 10% of someone's time or whether it's 100% of someone's time. It's a critical role. By all means, follow the strategy and playbook that's worked in the past. Seed questions, content calendars, building up champions, introduce yourself here threads, ask me anything. These are not new tactics in community, and there's a reason they're not new, because they work. You can't have community as a silo. It has to, and we pitch this so much in our presentation today. Community has to be a part of your organization. It can't be a department unto itself. It has to be sort of a connection of all the departments, and community has to be, from what I've seen, a top-down supported thing. If the board doesn't support it and the executive director's not on board and the heads of the departments aren't on board, if you're pushing this from the bottom up, it's going to be less successful, because those people aren't going to have a community first mindset, right? Mm-hmm. The next time we plan our conference, how does the community help us promote it? The next time we have a webinar, how do we have a follow-up in the community where there's an Ask Me Anything? The next time we form a committee, how do we get people from the community to be leaders of this? The next time we want to bring a new product on, let's create an ideation community and have members of our own community tell us what products and services they want us to create so we can sell them to them. Like, you have to have that holistic mentality when you approach community, and then it's going to be success. I almost believe any community concept can thrive if the value is in the community and there are people who want that value. If we can align those two things, you could have a community on virtually anything you could imagine.
And if you're listening to the point earlier Greg made, if you don't have a community manager, the communities I've seen fail had good ideas, but no one managing it. And so what it creates is your users have learned helplessness, if you've heard that term. They toss out ideas, no feedback. They ask questions, nobody comes around. Like, maybe someone else helps, but there's just a total lack of engagement. And so guess what? They're not going to bother. If they feel like you're not bothering, then they won't either. So community managers and having that face and having an identity as a representative of your community, you know, that is, it cannot, again, be overemphasized enough, because people will see that and they will appreciate that and they will take to it.
Well, Billy, I had fun on today's presentation. Hopefully,
yeah, me too.
Fun. I'm going to let you close it out with the final thought.
Me? I just had a good final thought. You know, let's keep going with the house analogies, everybody, if you need to explain it internally. No, I hope everybody's doing good during these, you know, tough times. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn a little bit with us. I appreciate Gregg hosting this and inviting me to join the Association Analytics call. And thank you guys for the great questions. This was truly interactive. I've done a lot of webinars, and a lot of times there is a lack of interactivity, but this group has been absolutely fantastic. The questions have been on point, the feedback. So thank you for participating, and hopefully I can work with all of you in the future.
All right, bye everybody. Bill, you want to wrap it up for us, and we're done.